They don't know who is standing in front of them. One mistake and their lives change forever when a wealthy businessman is thrown out of a luxury hotel simply because of the color of his skin. They don't realize that the next day they will have to face him in a very different situation, now that he makes the rules, and they will have to learn the true price of their prejudice. But first, you will have 7 lucky days if you like and subscribe within 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And don't forget to press the bell to follow the next interesting stories. David Carter, a successful Black entrepreneur, walked confidently into the opulent lobby of the Grand Elite Hotel, where his career-defining business meeting was scheduled. Dressed impeccably, he exuded professionalism and composure. Yet beneath his calm exterior, he sensed the undercurrent of discomfort in the air. From the moment he entered, subtle signs of discrimination became evident. The receptionist, a young woman with a forced smile, glanced at him with unease, her eyes betraying her hesitation. When David provided his reservation details, she insisted there was no record of it, her tone laced with doubt. As David calmly tried to explain and even offered to show proof, the hotel manager, Mr. Wallace, intervened. With a dismissive air, Wallace questioned David's presence, implying he had made a mistake. Despite David's insistence and his confirmation email, Wallace refused to reconsider. Instead, he called security to escort David out, treating him as an unwelcome intruder. When David reached for his phone to retrieve the reservation email, the guards interpreted his actions as a threat, escalating the situation unnecessarily. Humiliated and angry, David left the hotel, determined not to let the incident end there. This was not just an insult. It was a challenge he intended to confront head-on. David Carter stepped into the pristine lobby of the Grand Elite Hotel, the air thick with the faint scent of polished marble and floral arrangements. His tailored suit and confident demeanor turned a few heads, but the stares he received felt colder than usual. The subtle judgment in their eyes wasn't new, but it still stung. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and approached the front desk with purpose. Today was supposed to be a milestone of business meeting that could secure a major investment for his company. The receptionist, a young woman with a polished smile, glanced up as David approached. Her smile faltered for a moment as she looked him over, her expression betraying a mix of surprise and unease. "Good afternoon," she greeted him, her tone overly formal. "Good afternoon," David replied, his voice steady. "I have a reservation under the name David Carter. I'm here for a business meeting." The receptionist's fingers flew across the keyboard as she searched the system, but her hesitation was palpable. Her eyes darted from the screen to David and back again, as if questioning whether he truly belonged there. After a few moments, she looked up with a tight-lipped smile. "I'm sorry, sir, there seems to be no record of your reservation. Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" David kept his composure, though irritation bubbled beneath the surface. "This is the Grand Elite Hotel, correct? I have the confirmation email if you'd like me to show it to you." Before the receptionist could respond, the hotel manager, Mr. Wallace, appeared, his tailored suit and authoritative stride adding weight to the encounter. Wallace glanced at David briefly, his expression a mix of indifference and veiled disdain, before turning his attention to the receptionist. "Is there a problem here?" Wallace asked, his tone dripping with a practiced politeness that barely concealed his condescension. The receptionist hesitated. "This gentleman claims he has a reservation, but I couldn't find it in our system." Her words were low, as if she feared the repercussions of entertaining the idea. Wallace turned to David, his gaze narrowing slightly. "I'm afraid we don't have any record of your reservation, Mr. Carter. Are you certain you booked a room here?" His tone implied doubt, as though David's mere presence was an anomaly. "Yes, I'm certain," David replied firmly, keeping his emotions in check. "I can show you the confirmation email." He reached into his pocket to retrieve his phone, but Wallace raised a hand dismissively. "It won't be necessary," Wallace said with a thin, insincere smile. "However, we have certain standards here, and if you don't have a confirmed reservation, I must ask you to leave." David's patience wore thin. "I have a confirmed reservation," he reiterated, his tone firmer now. "Please check again." Wallace's expression hardened. He glanced at the security guards stationed nearby and called them over with a simple gesture. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice firm, "please escort this man out of the hotel. He's clearly mistaken." The guards approached quickly, their hands hovering near their radios. David instinctively reached for his phone again to show proof of his booking, but one of the guards barked, "Hands where I can see them." His voice echoed through the lobby, drawing the attention of onlookers. David froze, his hand still in his pocket. "I'm just getting my phone to show you the email," he said, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "Sir, we need you to comply," the other guard insisted, stepping closer. The tension in their stances was palpable, their readiness to escalate evident. David took a deep breath, his heart pounding. The weight of judgment from the guests and staff pressed down on him, their silent stares carrying accusations without merit. He knew this was a battle he couldn't win in this moment. Slowly, he raised his hands in a gesture of compliance. "Fine," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the simmering anger within. "I'll leave, but this isn't over." As he turned to walk away, the guards roughly grabbed his arms, pushing him toward the exit. David stumbled slightly but straightened quickly, adjusting his jacket to maintain a shred of dignity. The whispers and snickers of onlookers echoed in his ears as he exited the hotel, his business meeting now compromised. Outside, David paused to collect himself, his mind racing with thoughts of how to address this injustice. This wasn't just an insult, it was a blatant act of discrimination. As he smoothed his jacket and pulled out his phone to call his associates, a new sense of resolve hardened within him. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. The incident at the Grand Elite Hotel quickly became a lightning rod for public outrage after a guest captured the confrontation on video and uploaded it online. Within hours, the footage went viral, showing David Carter, a black businessman, being mistreated and forcibly removed from the upscale establishment despite his calm attempts to provide proof of his reservation. The video struck a nerve with viewers, igniting widespread condemnation of the hotel's blatant racial profiling and discriminatory practices. Social media platforms were flooded with angry comments, calls for boycotts, and demands for accountability from the hotel's management. As the story gained traction, news outlets picked it up, amplifying the backlash. The hotel's carefully curated image of luxury and exclusivity crumbled overnight. Its social media pages were inundated with negative reviews, and the fallout began affecting its business operations. Investors grew wary, and the hotel's stock value plummeted within a single day. Amid the chaos, David Carter quietly mobilized his network of resources. A seasoned entrepreneur with extensive connections in the business world, David saw an opportunity to turn this act of prejudice into a decisive victory. He contacted his financial team and began discussions to acquire a controlling interest in the hotel. By leveraging the drop in the hotel's market value and his own substantial resources, David swiftly negotiated a purchase deal. By the end of the day, the transaction was finalized. David Carter, once humiliated and cast out as an unwelcome guest, was now the majority owner of the Grand Elite Hotel. Standing outside the building that had only hours earlier represented his humiliation, David felt a quiet sense of triumph. What had begun as a moment of indignity had transformed into a turning point not just for him, but for the hotel and its future. Tomorrow he would return, not as a guest, but as the man in charge, ready to reshape the institution and its values. The next morning, David Carter stood outside the Grand Elite Hotel, its grand facade bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun. Unlike the day before, he was no longer an unwelcome guest, but the new majority owner of the establishment. His steps were purposeful as he entered the lobby, his presence immediately drawing the attention of the staff. The very employees who had judged and dismissed him the previous day now stared in shock and disbelief as murmurs spread among them. David ignored their whispers, heading straight to the front desk. The receptionist, the same young woman who had doubted him before, paled visibly upon recognizing him. Her hands trembled as she fumbled to summon the manager, Mr. Wallace. Within moments, Wallace emerged from his office, his confident demeanor noticeably absent. His expression shifted from confusion to panic as he laid eyes on David, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Carter," Wallace began, forcing a strained smile, "what brings you back here today? Is there something we can assist you with?" David returned Wallace's smile, though his carried the weight of authority. Without responding to the pleasantry, David pulled out a folder from his briefcase and placed it firmly on the desk. "These documents confirm that I am now the majority owner of the Grand Elite Hotel," he announced calmly but firmly. The lobby fell silent as Wallace picked up the papers, his hands shaking. His eyes darted over the legal text and his face turned pale. "There must be some mistake," Wallace stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no mistake," David replied, his tone even. "I acquired controlling interest as of last night. Effective immediately, I'm making significant changes." David turned to address the onlookers. "Mr. Wallace, your conduct yesterday was inexcusable and does not align with the values I intend to instill in this hotel. You are relieved of your duties as manager effective immediately. You may collect your belongings and leave the premises." Wallace's face turned crimson as he struggled to process the sudden reversal of power. For a moment, he looked as though he might argue, but David's unwavering gaze left no room for negotiation. Nodding stiffly, Wallace turned and walked away, his pride visibly shattered. With Wallace gone, David turned to the assembled staff. "This hotel will no longer tolerate discrimination, prejudice, or mistreatment of any guest. Starting today, we rebuild with fairness, respect, and a commitment to change." The room buzzed with a mix of fear, uncertainty, and curiosity as David cemented his authority, signaling the dawn of a new era at the Grand Elite Hotel. As the new owner of the Grand Elite Hotel, David Carter wasted no time in making his vision for the establishment clear. At a mandatory staff meeting held in the Grand Hall, he addressed the gathered employees with a calm yet commanding presence. The tension in the room was palpable. Some staff members, particularly those who had been with the hotel for years, exchanged uneasy glances, while others sat silently, arms crossed in resistance. David understood the weight of the task ahead but remained resolute. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and authoritative. "For those who don't know, my name is David Carter, and as of last night, I am the majority owner of the Grand Elite Hotel. Yesterday's events exposed a culture within this hotel that is deeply flawed and unacceptable. Discrimination, prejudice, and mistreatment of guests will no longer be tolerated here. Today, we begin rebuilding together." David announced several immediate changes, the cornerstone of which was mandatory cultural sensitivity training for every employee, regardless of rank. This training, he explained, was designed to educate the staff on the importance of inclusivity, equality, and respect. He emphasized that participation was non-negotiable. "This is about more than keeping your jobs," David continued. "It's about becoming better, learning from past mistakes, and building a future we can all be proud of." While some employees appeared receptive, nodding in agreement, a significant portion of the staff was visibly uncomfortable. Whispers spread among small groups as they processed the announcement. To some, particularly those who had thrived under the hotel's old culture of exclusivity and unchallenged privilege, David's reforms felt like a threat. In the days that followed, resistance began to take shape. Certain employees, including some in leadership roles, openly questioned the necessity of the training. Others quietly plotted ways to undermine David's authority, from spreading rumors about his leadership to fostering discontent among their colleagues. A few even toyed with the idea of filing complaints or staging a walkout. These murmurs of rebellion were especially strong among the hotel's old guard, individuals who had been in their positions for years and saw no need to adapt. David, however, was not naive. He anticipated pushback and had prepared accordingly. He began hiring new employees, people from marginalized backgrounds who had faced similar discrimination in their own lives and were eager for an inclusive work environment. These new hires not only brought fresh perspectives, but also served as a counterbalance to the resistant staff, gradually shifting the hotel's culture. David also made it a point to engage directly with the staff. He observed their daily routines, listened to their concerns, and confronted resistance head-on. When he learned of a group plotting to undermine his leadership, he called them into a private meeting. "I know some of you are unhappy with the changes," he said, his tone firm but understanding. "You feel like you've been demoted or disrespected. But ask yourselves why. Are you resisting because the changes are wrong or because they challenge the way things have always been?" His words left the group silent, their initial defiance giving way to unease. David made it clear that while he valued their contributions, he would not tolerate sabotage or disrespect. "You have a choice," he said. "Adapt and be part of this new chapter or leave. But understand this, I'm committed to these changes and I will see them through." As the weeks passed, the cultural overhaul began to take root. The mandatory training sessions proved to be a turning point for some. Employees who had initially been resistant began to reflect on their biases. One former supervisor, demoted to an entry-level position, admitted during a session, "I didn't realize how much I was judging people based on appearances. I thought I was being professional, but maybe I was just being unfair." Though resistance remained among a few, the tide was slowly turning. David's vision for the Grand Elite Hotel was becoming a reality, not just in policies, but in the attitudes of those who chose to stay. The journey was far from over, but the foundations of a new inclusive culture were being laid. For David, it was proof that even deeply ingrained systems could be changed with perseverance, compassion, and unyielding resolve. Under David Carter's leadership, the Grand Elite Hotel began a transformation unlike any it had seen before. David was determined to create a workplace that reflected the values of inclusivity, respect, and equality, and his first step was hiring new staff members from marginalized backgrounds. These new employees, many of whom had experienced discrimination elsewhere, were eager to work in an environment where their talents and efforts would be recognized. Their enthusiasm and fresh perspectives began to breathe new life into the hotel, challenging the entrenched attitudes of longtime employees. For some of the existing staff, however, the changes were difficult to accept. Many who had enjoyed positions of privilege under the old regime struggled with their demotions or new responsibilities. Former department heads and supervisors found themselves in entry-level roles, tasked with duties they had once delegated to others. For these employees, the loss of status was a bitter pill to swallow. Some resisted openly, while others engaged in quiet defiance, spreading rumors or fostering discontent among colleagues. One such individual was Brian, a former kitchen supervisor now reassigned to the cleaning staff. Accustomed to commanding respect and issuing orders, Brian initially balked at his new role. Scrubbing floors and washing dishes left his hands raw and his pride bruised. At first, he performed his duties with visible resentment, his frustration evident to everyone around him. Yet, as time passed, the hard labor began to instill a sense of humility and reflection that Brian hadn't experienced before. Slowly, he started to take pride in his work, even mentoring newer staff members who admired his attention to detail. Another example was Linda, a former front desk supervisor who had been reassigned as a bellhop. Initially, she saw the change as a punishment and resented David's leadership. However, during one of the mandatory cultural sensitivity training sessions, Linda had a breakthrough. "I've been thinking," she admitted, hesitantly, to her peers. "I used to believe I was being professional by judging people based on their appearance, but now I see I was being unfair. I didn't realize how much I was part of the problem." These moments of self-awareness were not isolated. The cultural training sessions became opportunities for growth. sparking conversations among staff members about their biases and past behaviors. Some employees embraced the chance to change, realizing they had been operating within a flawed system for years. For others, however, the resistance lingered. A small group of longtime employees openly expressed their disdain for the new direction, quietly plotting ways to undermine David's reforms. David, aware of these challenges, maintained a firm yet compassionate approach. He encouraged open dialogue but made it clear that the new policies were non-negotiable. "This is not just about a job," he told the staff during a meeting. "It's about creating a place where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of their background. If you can't align with these values, I understand, but you won't have a place here." Gradually, the tides began to turn. The new hires, many of whom had faced significant barriers in their careers, quickly proved their worth. Aisha, a former front desk clerk who had been denied promotions at another hotel, was now leading the guest relations team at the Grand Elite. Her warm, approachable leadership style set a new standard for customer service, inspiring both her peers and her subordinates. Meanwhile, the employees who chose to stay and adapt began to appreciate the fairness and inclusivity that David was fostering. For the first time, many of them felt that promotions and recognition were based on merit rather than favoritism or seniority. Those who remained resistant eventually decided to leave, unable to reconcile their old ways with the new reality. As the weeks turned into months, the hotel underwent a profound transformation. The staff began to reflect the diverse and inclusive environment that David envisioned, and this cultural shift extended to the guests as well. The Grand Elite Hotel was no longer just a symbol of luxury. It became a beacon of progress and redemption. Guests who had previously felt unwelcome now praised the hotel for its warm and inclusive atmosphere. Word of the changes spread, and the hotel began attracting a new clientele who valued its commitment to equality and respect. For David, the journey was far from over. He knew that change of this magnitude wouldn't happen overnight, and that challenges still lay ahead. As the transformation of the Grand Elite Hotel progressed, moments of redemption and reflection began to emerge among its staff. For many who had initially resisted the sweeping changes, the mandatory cultural sensitivity training became an eye-opening experience. These sessions, designed to confront biases and promote inclusivity, forced employees to reflect on their past behaviors and the underlying prejudices that had shaped their actions. Linda, a former front desk supervisor demoted to a bellhop, stood out during one training session. Hesitant at first, she eventually spoke up, her voice tinged with a mix of regret and newfound understanding. "I've been thinking," she began cautiously. "I used to believe I was being professional by judging people based on appearances, but now I see I wasn't fair. I didn't realize how much harm those assumptions could cause." Her admission resonated with her peers, sparking a thoughtful discussion about the subtle ways biases had influenced their decisions and interactions. Brian, a former kitchen supervisor now on the cleaning crew, also experienced a shift in perspective. While his initial resentment was palpable, the physical labor of his new role, combined with the introspective nature of the training, gradually humbled him. In a candid moment during one session, he admitted, "I've always prided myself on running a tight ship, but I never stopped to think about how I treated the people under me. I see now that respect goes both ways." These moments of honesty marked the beginning of a cultural shift within the hotel. Employees who had once clung to outdated attitudes started to embrace change, recognizing their own growth as individuals. While not everyone underwent such a transformation, enough did to create a ripple effect among the staff. The training sessions became not just a tool for policy enforcement, but a space for personal growth and understanding. For David Carter, these reflections were a validation of his vision. Slowly but surely, the Grand Elite Hotel was becoming a place where inclusivity and respect weren't just policies, they were values embraced by those who chose to stay and grow. Under David Carter's transformative leadership, the Grand Elite Hotel evolved into a symbol of redemption, inclusivity, and progress. What had once been a bastion of exclusivity and subtle discrimination became a beacon of change, attracting not only a diverse clientele, but also a staff committed to upholding its new values. The hotel's environment shifted dramatically as employees who embraced the changes began to thrive. Individuals who had initially resisted the cultural overhaul now found themselves flourishing in roles where merit and effort were the only standards for success. Aisha, once an overlooked front desk clerk at another establishment, now excelled as the head of guest relations, setting a new tone of warmth and professionalism for the hotel. Her leadership inspired both longtime employees and newer hires, proving that inclusivity could elevate not just individuals but the entire team. Linda, who had initially resisted her demotion to bellhop, became a surprising advocate for the new culture. Her personal reflections during the training sessions led to genuine changes in her approach. As she interacted with guests and colleagues, she began to take pride in her role, embodying the hotel's new ethos of equality and respect. Meanwhile, David remained firm but compassionate with those who struggled to adapt. He understood that not everyone would align with his vision and gave employees the option to leave if they could not embrace the changes. Many of the old guard, those accustomed to operating under the previous hierarchy, chose to depart rather than confront their biases or relinquish their former authority. Their absence made way for a wave of fresh talent, eager to contribute to the inclusive culture David was building. The impact of these changes extended beyond the staff to the guests themselves. Visitors who had once felt unwelcome in the hotel now praised its warm and inclusive atmosphere. Word spread about the transformation, and the Grand Elite Hotel began attracting a new clientele that valued its commitment to equality and exceptional service. The shift in reputation also brought financial success, as the hotel's occupancy rates rose steadily and it became a model for inclusivity in the hospitality industry. For David, the transformation was deeply fulfilling. Walking through the bustling lobby, he could see the results of his efforts. A dynamic, collaborative environment where everyone, from the staff to the guests, felt valued. The Grand Elite Hotel was no longer just a luxury establishment. It was a testament to the power of redemption and the strength of leadership rooted in fairness and respect. David had not only rebuilt a hotel, but also redefined what it could stand for in the eyes of the world. The story of David Carter and the Grand Elite Hotel is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the potential for transformative change. What began as an act of humiliation and prejudice became a story of redemption, growth, and leadership. David's unwavering commitment to justice turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity to challenge a flawed system and rebuild it with inclusivity and respect at its core. Through his actions, David not only changed the trajectory of his own life, but also impacted countless others, from the employees who learned to embrace equality to the guests who now experience an atmosphere of warmth and belonging. The Grand Elite Hotel, once a symbol of exclusion, is now a beacon of hope and progress, proving that with determination and vision, even the most entrenched systems can evolve. This story is a reminder that leadership is not about titles or power. It's about using influence to make meaningful changes. It challenges us to reflect on our own roles in fostering inclusivity and to consider how we can contribute to creating environments where everyone is valued and respected. As you reflect on this inspiring journey, consider sharing it with someone who may find motivation in its message. Stories like these remind us of the importance of fighting for what is right and the transformative power of perseverance and compassion. If this story resonates with you, let us know what you think, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it to spread the message of hope and change.